Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emma. I work for EDINA and I've working on Digimap for a long time. We are delighted to say we have Eddie Bulpett here from Ordnance Surveys Consultancy and Technical Services, who's going to talk us through the basics of the relatively new National Geospatial Data, National Geographic Database, sorry, NGD data. This is the latest thing. It is moving towards replacing many other things too. So it's worth getting ahead of the game with this one and learning what you can about it. It is currently available through Digimap if you have a subscription to the NGD data as well as a subscription to the Ordnance Survey data. Eddie's going to give us a presentation about the basics of the data itself, and at the end of that, I will give you a run through to show you where you can download it from Digimap. Eddie, thank you very much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, so hi. My name is Eddie Bulpett, and as Emma said, I'm a geospatial consultant within the CATS team at Ordnance Survey. Anyone that's had any dealings with Ordnance Survey will know that we love an acronym, and CATS stands for Consultation and Technical Services. So what I'm going to do is just give you a brief overview of what OS NGD is and how it came about for those of you that may not be completely aware of it. And again, we love an abbreviation at OS, and OS NGD is, as Emma pointed out, the Ordnance Survey National Geographic Database. So to set the scene, what are Ordnance Survey's in-life products? And these are some of the products that you should be familiar with. So here's a slide that shows you the slew of products that we've got in our OS Master Map generation of data. Now, of course, all of these aren't OS Master Maps. Some of these are rasters, addressing, but they all fall under that general era of the OS Master Map generation. So as you can see, there's lots to choose from. And also there'll be lots of highly entertaining technical specifications and getting started guides to help you make an informed choice as to what data would best suit your needs and answer any of those burning geographical or geospatial questions that you may have. So this slide makes it a little bit easier on the eye. It breaks things down into more understandable themes like I'll just turn on my laser pointer. Like we've got topography, we've got addressing represented here by code point address space family, networks as in highways, and there's water as well, and the path network. We've got the contextual mapping, which is the rasters that you'll probably be familiar with, where they're associated with products like Explorer and Land Ranger. And we've got some more of the more specialised data sets like the OS Master Map sites and green space. So, like I say, some of you may be familiar with these and you may have used them in the past. So, now we come on to NGD. What's the difference with OS NGD? Well, OS NGD is made up of 9 data themes. We've got address, admin and statistical units, which is just a posh way of saying boundaries, buildings, geographical names, land cover and land use. The difference between these, as you probably come to a conclusion yourself, land cover is actually what's on the ground at the moment, like rough grass, scrub, heath. Land use tells you what that actual land is being used for, agricultural use, for example. We've also got structures, which brings in things like bridges, pylons, transport, as you'd expect, and of course, water. So all of these contain either one or more data collection, and each data collection has a number of data features. So, for example, if we look at the buildings data, this has a collection that has the building, which is the polygon of the whole footprint, if you like, of the building line data features, or the internal divisions or the walls between the buildings, and building part data features, which are the polygons that represent a whole building that go from the floor to the roof of the overarching building or the building footprint. So hopefully being able to access all this OS data at this granular level allows you to carry out more detailed analysis and adjust the data you need at a more precise level. Now, apologies, this is going to be a little bit wordy, this one, because I'll need to get across what the key benefits are. So what are the key benefits of NGD? Well, first of all, it gives you an increased data frequency because the data that we supply through the Data Hub is updated daily. You can choose exactly what you need, and there are new and easier ways to access data that are in customer-friendly formats, which is important, like GeoPackage or CSV. And GeoJSON is available via the OS NGD Features API, and vector tiles are also available via the OS NGD API tiles. So, although through Digimap, the options are only, I think, geo, package, and file geodatabase, and the data is more discoverable with more improved data structures and metadata. And we've got a new and bespoke documentation that's actually within the OS Select and Build. But if you can't get hold of the OS Select and Build, there's a brand new documentation platform that is built on the Git platform or Git books. I think it's worth mentioning at this point, the only supply channel for OS premium data for academics such as yourselves is Digimap. The OS Data Hub is really only available to you for open data. And while OS Select and Build and the filtering by feature type is not available through Digimap, there are workarounds which I'll come to in a little bit. But I guess the burning question a lot of you may have is, why potentially upset the apple cart and create OS NGD? Well, there's several reasons. It's a lot of effort to create a whole new portfolio of products like this, so why do we do it? Because OS maps and laterally data have always been evolving and adapting to change in terms of markets and technology. And for years, we've produced all our maps based on military use and paper maps, basically what they look like. And as a little bit more of an historical aside, we used to only capture walls that were, I think, at the time in imperial measurements, 3'6" high. And this was the height of the wall that was deemed the lowest height of a wall that a sniper or a rifleman could hide behind. We also used to say, well, we're going to capture a copse if it's a certain area. I can't remember what that is, but it was in an old imperial measurement. And that was a copse that a platoon of infantrymen could hide within. So, as you can see, our roots are very much based in the military and the cartographic background. So then we started digitising all our maps, first producing a product called Landline, and I am old enough to remember that and have actually worked on it. And that then in itself evolved into the OS Master Map, which we all know and love, which introduced the toy to the world. And the digitisation of our core data and advances in data capture significantly reduced the lead times. And I can remember when I was working in Carto, you could have a 10K map of the centre of London on your desk for about 3 months. So as soon as that was published, it was out of date. But the specification that we still used in OS Master Map was still largely cartographic. And the specification was mostly about how to style the data to make it look good. But unfortunately, markets like technology were advancing and customers were demanding more analytical data. So you could rightly ask, why didn't OS just put extra attribution into the existing portfolio of OS Master Map products? Quite simply, it's the cost and the logistics of informing our customers that that's what we're doing. And then we'd have to manage the fallout of such an upheaval because, as you know, if you go and change the data specification or anything, our customers then have to think about changing their systems and their data loading software. So we just decided on a new portfolio. And an analogy that I like to use would be if you decide to put air conditioning in an old car. So first of all, you're going to have to adjust the structure of the car to accommodate the new air conditioning equipment. So that's going to be a cost. The cost of the new equipment is going to be a cost. When you've done that, you might have to get the car, put it through safety testing, which is another cost. So at the end of the day, it might be cheaper just to buy a new car. So what we are choosing to do is run both of OS NGD and our in-life products in parallel so that customers can transition from one to the other when they feel comfortable to do so. And one of the key phrases behind any company, as I'm sure you're aware, is usually something along the lines of think customer. And again, I'm going to go back historically. I'm sure some of you will be able to remember a national event that happened in the summer of 2012. That was the London Olympics. And we had several team members from our CATS team that were seconded to the Cabinet Office to help with the London Olympics to supply mapping and some geospatial analysis. And the night before the opening ceremony, the SITCEN, or the Situation Centre, at the Cabinet Office got in touch to say that they'd received a credible threat warning and needed to know where all the L substars or electrical substations were in and around Stratford. So this wasn't an easy task, and it was a real eye-opening moment for the CATS team when they realised just how clunky OS data could be for this kind of analysis. And these were seasoned geospatial pros, so they knew what they were doing. So they just thought, how are customers going to manage if they're trying to find out this kind of information? But we also have teams of people working at the OS that work out specifications for different products, so they will suit the purposes of different market sectors and segments. And this is why we've got 4 flavors of addressing, for example. We've got AB Core, AB Basic, AB Plus, and AB Premium. So we've got address products that will work for any company in any sector that meets their needs. So we've got an address-based product that will work for a company that just needs to send out a mail merge, so, you know, for mail shots and reaching their customers. And we've also got the analytical, more analytical addressing products like AB Prem. So this epiphany that our CATS team at the Olympics had, coupled with the work that goes into designing and researching new products, spawned a new range of products that you probably come across in you know, from our OS products. We've got OS Open Zoom Stack, and we've got OS Master Map Sites, OS Master Map Green Space, but we've also got improvements to the classification of our addressing products. And of course, latterly, this applies to OS NGD. And of course, we've got more accessible supply formats. Right, so why have I got a picture of a Lego shop here? So in summary, the key is that NGD gives you this option of just choosing the data you want in the format that you need for a specific task. So to use this Lego shop as an analogy, you'll see on the side, and this is the Lego shop in Southampton, West Quay. This is, as you see on this side of thing, you've got pre-packed kits that let you build a model of, say, I don't know, Yamaha NT10 SP, or if money's no object, the Titanic. But you can't easily build anything else with these kits. You only get the model bike or the model ship. However, if you look at the back of the shop, there's the pick and build wall at the back, which this allows you to choose any combination of bricks or other accessories to build exactly what you want. So from an OS data perspective, you might not want all the polygons that come with the OS Master Map topography layer, or topographic areas, for example. You may only need the buildings. So with NGD, you just select the OS NGD buildings theme, saving you the overhead of pre-processing data, loading it into a database, then filtering out the buildings from topo using the theme, descriptive group, descriptive terms, or whatever. So NGD gives you the freedom to choose the data sets that you need and combine them to create your own data solution. Now you'll notice I've put an asterisk against customers here, as I think I need to define this. It's really only PSJ members and partners that have access to the premium data, while anybody else can have access to the open data via the OS Data Hub. Right, so pictures are always better than words. So here's a graphic representation of the OS NGD themes. And the eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that there are 12 here when I said there were 9 originally. But this is because I've split the transport theme into features, the transport network, and RAMI, or routing and information management information. And I've also split the water from its component features into the water network. So this is how the data is represented in Digimap, or it was the last time I looked, but you'll notice we've still got boundaries up there, not admin and statistical units. So yeah, that is admin and statistical units. So although this isn't ordered by theme, and as I mentioned before, the themes are address, admin and statistical units, buildings, geographic names, land cover, land use, structures and transport, and water. It's fairly easy to determine what each collection is used for. So it's fairly straightforward to identify what you need from there. Most themes have one collection. The exceptions are, of course, transport, which is split into RAMI, features, network, and water, which is also split into features and network, as I've mentioned previously. Now, I mentioned OS Select and Build a couple of slides ago, and this is available to use through the OS Data Hub and allows you to further interrogate and select data at feature type level to create a recipe where you can filter the data you want down to the feature type level. Unfortunately, this isn't an option for OS Digimap, but there are querying options that you can use, which I will come on to momentarily. So how can OS NGD be used in anger? I'll give you another little bit of information about Ordnance Survey you might not be aware of, but we offer a mapping for emergency services. I'll say that again. offer a mapping for emergency service that is available 24/7. And this is set up to help public sector bodies with custom data or personnel to help during a natural or man-made disaster. And where that public sector body that made the request can't do this for themselves. Number of reasons for this. The staff may be on the front line of the incident. They might not have the capacity to cope with the demands for geographic or geospatial data placed upon them. They might have the technical ability or the technical resource to fulfill it. So we will help out in these emergencies. Anyway, in this instance, an LRF, which as you can see there is a local resilience forum. I'll explain. A local resilience forum is a group set up by local authorities that look to mitigate risks that they may see happening in the future. For example, we did one for Hampshire and Isle of Wight LRF. We were looking at what would happen if there was like a Spanish flu outbreak, akin to the one after the First World War. And we did some work with Hampshire and Isle of Wight LRF around that. Fortunately, well, maybe not fortunately, the year before COVID struck. So they had some ideas of how they could cope with that when it hit. But anyway, in this instance, LRF asked us if we could supply them with the data listed here to help them with the responsible storm units before it hit. So what I'll do now, given you've probably all got some knowledge of Ordnance Survey data, just have a think amongst yourselves for a couple of minutes how you might go about getting this data based on your knowledge of Ordnance Survey data. Just give you a couple of minutes to think about that. And don't worry, I'm not going to pick on anybody to ask what you do, but yeah, just have a think about that using our in-life products. Gives me a chance to have a sip of tea. So. I think it's probably giving you enough time. So, as I said, one option is to use our in-life products or the OS Mastermap types of products. So the first thing you need to do is decide what data you're going to need. Secondly, you're going to need to be able to access this data, and you're possibly going to need an area of interest to clip this data to. So some of these are really quite straightforward. For example, we've got railway lines. They're easily found in OS Mastermap, Vector Map Local. Airports and railway stations, you can easily find those in OS Mastermap sites. Pylons can be easily found by querying the feature description again in OS Mastermap VML. But then we get on things like tall buildings. How are you going to find them easily? And what's the definition of a tall building? We had to do a query on tall buildings or residential buildings over 18 metres in the wake of the Grenfell disaster. So how'd you go about that? It's basically done on spatial queries and joins. You're going to have to join the building heights attribute to the topo areas toid, and then you can do some queries to bring out the height of the buildings. The same with electrical substations. You need to identify the topographic area polygons. How do you do that? Load an address data set, join it to the address and topo area toid, and then find out what the classification code is in the address base for the L substars, and then run a database query on this. But then we've got bridges as well. How are you going to find bridges? Well, they can be found, but there's quite a lot of querying to do, and you have to query it on the descriptive term attribute, which is held in an array in the database as well. A bit more of a complication. And then you'd have to do some magical spatial querying to find the intersections with different kinds of network, and that helps you work out what kind of bridge it is. So this data can be found and supplied, but there are 10 different data sets here to supply in a short space of time. And if you're a lone MFE responder, this could be quite a daunting task. However, let's see how NGD compares. So we quickly nip onto the OS Data Hub, or Digimap in your case, and it's so much easier because the processing is done in the background. You don't have to do it yourself, so you don't have the pre-processing, loading into your data, and then start the querying. So this represents a massive cost saving in overheads, plus the data will be instantly usable as a plug and play geo package, or alternatively an easily imported CSV. So what can we do? So looking at NGD, if you want to find the tall buildings, you just create a recipe. It's buildings, as we mentioned before, building part, and then the relative height roof base is an attribute of the building part. So we want to find buildings that are greater than or equal to 18 metres. Quite straightforward. Same with electrical substations. We can use the structure point, and the description equals our substar or electrical substation. And we can also use land use, where we look at the site and you look at where the description is in our substar, electrical storage site, electrical distribution site. Major roads, easy again. Transport network roads, where low classification is in motorway or A road. Railway transport network, railway link, straightforward. And railway stations, land use again, the site where you've got the description in this list here. So that should bring back all your railway stations. Pylons again, using structure, description, electricity pylon. And so it goes on. You can see it's so much easier to get the data that you need really, really quite quickly. Now, I said you won't have the luxury of using select and build. You'll have to interrogate the data at source, either after importing it into a database, which would be preferable, or within a GIS, which would work, but it can be memory hungry. It could take a while, depending on the size of the database. But you'll see here, hopefully, the SQL queries that you would have to write, really quite straightforward. And it's basically the same sort of SQL queries that are working in the background of select and build. So, for example, if you want to find the tall buildings, select all from the schema here, which is OS NGD building features, and the table is building features, building part, where relative height maximum is greater than or equal to 18. Same with our substars, really straightforward again. Select all from the schema, which is OS NGD structured features, where the structure feature structure point, sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful, where the description equals electricity substation. And you can see the same, major roads, very straightforward SQL query, railway line, even simpler one. Railway stations, we've got this where the description is in that list, which go back there, which is the same there. So you can see we're just repeating the SQL that would be working in the background of the OS select and build. So how can we use this for something else? We had to do a task where we had to analyse pavement widths. And again, if you remember back to COVID, this was a requirement during that time to allow safe passing distances. But why pavements? Well, you can see there from the list, there are a raft of other uses rather than safe passing. Promoting active travel, safe routes for school, which is a real big thing for local authorities. We're often helping them working out safe routes for schools with the road and path networks. Accessibility for people that might not be quite as agile or able-bodied as other people. Road space allocation, town and country planning, 15-minute cities, crime prevention, and as you can see, social traffic regulation orders, and indeed social distancing. So let's see how this works. So obviously the slide there is showing you how you get the data out using OS select and build. We're looking at getting the data out of Digimap. So hopefully this will work for Digimap. So like I said, ordinarily you can nip into the OS Data Hub and select and build, where you could use this process that you can see on the side here. But with Digimap, you would need to select the transport features from the collections available to you from the Digimap site. And then, like the previous slide, you run an SQL query against the road track or path data along the lines of something like select all from road, track or path, where the description equals path or description, or descriptions equals path and steps, or descriptions equals pavement, or description equals pavement and steps. And that would bring you back everything that's associated with pavements. So I'll give you a methodology overview. I'm not going to go into the minutiae of the workings, but we did use FME and a number of transformers. But this will just give you a heads up as the methodology that we used. So we used a transformer to generate a center line down the pavement polygons that we got back from Data Hub. And this was imaginatively called center line replacer. But as I mentioned, we used other transformers to create these. So what we effectively did, and like I said, I'll run over this quite briefly. Along each center line, we created a point along this at 1 meter intervals. And then we generalized the center line as well to make it smoother. Then the center line was broken at all those points we made, and also broke that as well if it intersected other lines as well to create a junction. And then the center lines are split at this distance. And and then each centre line is rotated through 90 degrees. You can see, just in the background there, you can see these lines that are perpendicular to what would be a centre line if there was one there. And then each line is extended by a set amount, user-defined amount, say 10 metres, or enough to take it over the bounding line or bounding edge of that particular polygon. And then those transects, which are the perpendicular lines you can see there, those are clipped and the remnants are removed, and the length of the transect is then added as an attribute to that particular transect. We used other transformers within FME to quality assure and clean up any remaining overhangs, or remove any transects that didn't cross any polygon outside of any of the polygons. So this illustrates just what those transects look like after all the processes have been done. Doesn't look very interesting at the moment until, as you remember, we added the length of the transects to as an attribute to each transect. So you can then colour them up. So this looks like it's appended with the length in meters, and as you can see there, excuse me, all these are coloured up according to their length. The shortest being red, or in this case, if it was COVID, the pavements you want to avoid, and the longest being green. So as I say, you can easily identify where your widest pavements are. So, right, what's the point in doing that? I know how wide my pavements are. And, well, in this case, the London Borough thought it was useful to identify areas that could be greened with planters or trees, thereby increasing the green estate of the borough. But it also indicated areas that could be used for communal bike storage units that aren't on the road and that also wouldn't impede pedestrians. So that takes me up to the end of a very brief overview of what OS NGD data is. So many thanks. Can't see if any of you are still awake, but thank you if you are. But I mentioned there are some resources here. This one here is the OS Data Hub. Like I say, you can help yourself to all sorts of open data there. And there's also some British Geological Survey open data in there as well, which is quite interesting as well. This is the site for the documentation that I mentioned, based on, as I said, Git books. That gives you all the information you need about OS NGD. And if you look at the top, there should be a list as well. You can also use this Git process or the Git platform to look at our in-life products as well. But I'd also draw your attention to this link as well, which is one of our other resources called More Than Maps. It gives you a lot more information about the data that we've got available that you can get access to, but it also gives you some use cases. I'll just give you one here with pavement widths, but there is a lot more use cases, a lot more customer stories, but there are also some practical lessons that you can get involved with by downloading some sample data, get your hands dirty with some of the SQL or some other processes using QGIS or ArcPro, ArcMap, MapInfo. So that's it. So if you've got any questions, happy to take them now, and if I can answer them as well. So.
Thanks, Eddie. That was wonderful. I forgot to say at the beginning that we will have a recording of this webinar available later once we get a little bit of time to process it and send it out to you. It'll come with a transcript as well as the footage. If anybody has questions, please can you add them to the chat, and then we can go through them and answer them one by one. That would be great, please. In just a moment, I will show you how to download the data from Digimap directly. It is worth us saying now that there's a huge amount of investment that's gone into the OS Select and Build platform. Digimap doesn't aim to replicate that. Needless to say, while OS may be meeting sort of critical need and time critical needs for access to data in this way, Digimap doesn't offer that. Of course, we are not a sort of 6th, 7th, 8th emergency service, as it were. It is intended for you to take a little bit more time to identify what you want and how to get it and so on. But as Eddie says, the data is still structured in that way, and you can still query it and get out exactly what you need. Digimap does offer you a degree of customization when you select your area and download it, but it's not quite as flexible as the select and build option from OS directly. I don't think off the top of my head, it would be worth our while ploughing in the same investment that OS have done for their select and build service to make that sort of function available within Digimap. It wouldn't be cost effective, and I'm sure we'd all agree we don't need subscription fees to go up any more than they already are. So I'm already logged into Digimap here. I'm going to go to the OS collection here and click on the first link on the right-hand side, and you'll see the familiar map. NGD is not mapped as a product yet within Digimap, so you can only get it from the data download section, which is on the left-hand side here. Once you have an institutional subscription to Digimap and you've registered through Digimap and agreed to the licenses, you'll see that OS NGD appears at the top of the list here. As Eddie pointed out earlier, it's split into its respective parts, so you can select as many as you wish. I need to select an area of interest first. There is a limit to the amount you can download per layer, and that's for operational reasons, not because there's a limit imposed upon us by anyone else. We're trying to manage the traffic across all 165 data products and 75,000 users and so on. So we do have to be mindful that traffic management's important. Once you've selected your area, you add those to the basket, and you can see that we have either the geopackage or the file geodatabase options for each layer. There is a function to select some layers within each, some sub-layers within each layer. These have been split up, I think, in a way that makes sense in accordance with the OS data structure, although it may not replicate exactly what you would see in the OS data hub. But you can pick out and choose the sections that you want as you go for each different layer. So you don't have to take everything. It's as you say, it's a little bit more cumbersome than the select and build process through the OS Data Hub, but it does still offer you a degree of sub-selection functionality. And then once you've selected whatever it is that you need, you can then request your download, and it will be emailed to you when it's ready for processing as usual. If you don't see OS NGD in this left-hand list here, the thing to check would be the license agreements link up here. Mine is EDINA, so it looks slightly funny, but if there is a license agreement you haven't agreed to, you'll see a number here. Once you click on this, you can then go and find the license agreement here that you need to accept. You will find NGD listed here next to the OS collection. You need to accept that, and then once you go back to the OS application there, you should find that NGD will appear in the list for you there. Okay, that's a very quick run through. I don't think I need to say anything else, but if there are more questions, then I'm happy to take them.